Underground. 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 Underground.
Season's greetings, surface dwellers. My name is Michael, and these are my chthonic musings. For today's video, which will be the last video of 2025, will also be a first. My first reaction video. Not too long ago, our bartender in the OSR, Eric Tenkar, put out a video about reaction rolls and morale checks. And so I'll be reacting to the reaction rolls and morale checks video. Mostly the reaction rolls. But how will I react to that video? I will be using the Hyperborea 3rd edition table 137 reaction, and I rolled an 8, but our friend Eric is a little bit charismatic, let's say. So we'll give him a +1. So rather than an 8, which would have been neutral, disinterested in, or uncertain, I will instead, with 9, move to friendly. Considers ideas and proposals. So I'm going to consider Eric's ideas and proposals, which is a good idea. So even though we come up with friendly, there are a few other entries which would have been more positive. At 11, we would have been agreeable, willing, and helpful. That's out. 12 or more, affable, extremely accommodating. This is the internet. That's not going to happen. So, in the spirit of the season, I will say, Eric, I got a lot of problems with your video, and now you're going to hear about it. All right, first order of business. For those viewers unfamiliar with the culture and sensibilities of New Yorkers, my seasonal airing of grievances is meant as a good-natured busting of chops, as we'll say. And in fact, I am a supporter of the Tenkar Tavern YouTube channel. This video that I'm reacting to is one of a series of videos that Eric is making for BX Dungeons & Dragons. And it's an excellent topic, and one that I had more to say about than would really fit in a comment, and kind of what spurred the video, my video response or reaction. I have made a playlist on my channel here for this that contains this video of Eric's, along with a number of other videos of YouTubers talking about reactions and morale. And in addition, on Tenkar Tavern's channel, I see he also has a playlist of the various BX series, the BX videos that Eric is doing, of which this reaction and morale video is one of an excellent series that you should also take a look at if you haven't seen them already. All right, in Dungeons & Dragons BX, we basically have 2 reaction tables we can see here. One is for hiring retainers and the retainer reactions, which I'm not going to spend too much time on that one specifically. I'm going to focus more on the monster reactions table. Although both are important and have their place, I think a further discussion of retainer reactions would probably be best suited in a video about retainers and hirelings. In Eric's video about reaction roll tables and morale checks, he tells us that they aren't optional, they aren't flavor, they aren't DM tools. They are the decision-making engine of the entire system. Ignore them, and BX collapses into bad modern habits. I can say that I understand where he's coming from, and I agree with the spirit of the importance of these tools, but I do disagree with his exact framing here. Regardless of how important they might be and how useful, I do believe that they are tools. And in fact, if we take literally what is in BASIC under the reaction table, it tells us that some monsters always act in the same way, such as zombies who always attack, and I don't think we have any disagreement there. But it also goes on to say, however, the reactions of most monsters are not always the same. That's good. But then it says the DM can always choose the monster's reactions to fit the dungeon, but if he decides not to do this, a DM may use the reaction table below to determine the monster's reactions. Roll 2d6. That sounds a whole lot like optional to me. Now, we might agree that we should try to use this option and vary up our encounters whenever we can. But I don't think saying it's not optional is a correct statement. So when should we use it? What is the purpose of these tools? And I think we can agree that it's really to spark the dungeon master or game master to think about the nature of the encounter and try to vary things up and get out of rut if that's an issue. And along the same lines, just in the way that having different types of encounters will keep your players on their toes, because they'll actually have to think about what's going on and maybe ask some questions, maybe hold back a little bit before they just launch into an attack. It'll also keep yourself as a game master a little bit wondering about what's going to unfold in this game, and that's exciting in my opinion. And along that same line of thought, Eric tells us in his video that the DM is not supposed to decide outcomes in advance. And I can certainly agree with that statement, that we don't decide the outcome. But I think that he might be saying in that statement, and I'm not entirely sure, but we'll examine this line of thought here, that the reaction roll should always be done at the time, at the table, and that then whatever that reaction roll determines, the DM should then construct what it means and improv, basically, at the game table. In my opinion, that's certainly one way to do it, and those DMs that are comfortable doing that type of improv can certainly take that path. But I don't think that that's the only way. I think that sometimes these encounters can be prepped ahead of time, and a reaction roll or a couple of possible reaction rolls could be determined, and then give the DM a little bit of time to think through that in this situation, what does it mean, and how can that be possible, and give them a little bit more time so that they're ready for that at the table. And because forcing the DM into a situation to do that at the table may be a bit of overload for them, and doing a little bit of prep ahead of time may be beneficial, not only to reduce the cognitive load at the time of the game, but also it may spark some ideas. You say, well, if that were true, if these orcs were not going to attack, then what would that mean? And then that may lead you along a certain line that you make some other changes in other parts of the scenario that you're putting together, or the dungeon. You might set aside a certain room with a purpose that ties into the reason why certain reactions that are not expected are actually happening. And Eric also tells us in his video that reaction rolls are not about being friendly. They are about initial posture. Hostile, wary, uncertain, open, curious. And that seems reasonable, but the only problem is if we look at the table in Moldvay Basic, the last entry, number 12, is enthusiastic friendship. So I think what we're looking at is like two different layers. I mean, we have the rules, and they're very kind of concise, and we've got the table. But there also needs to be a certain culture and tradition and experience of how to take this idea and this tool and to apply it, and maybe in many cases, most cases, not quite literally, but in the spirit of a variety of reactions and what they mean. And I'm going to go over a few other tools and things in other games that kind of go along that lines of how do we develop for game masters an understanding of how to apply and the skills that they need to have in order to be on the fly or ahead of time, in both cases be able to apply this kind of idea of variable reactions. On the screen here we can see the reaction tables from a number of games, either Dungeons & Dragons themselves, the OD&D, the original, and Advanced Dungeons & Dragons First Edition, or other old school, considered OSR games, or even if you don't consider Shadow Dark OSR per se, it's at least an old school inspired game, and is using the same type of reaction table as many of these other games. AD&D First Edition is a notable exception in that it's AD&D 1E is using a percentile instead of the 2d6 that all these other games are using. We can see a general pattern in the 2d6 rolls where they go from in OD&D it's very basic. It just says negative reaction to uncertain to positive reaction, with the top of the bell curve, the 7 through 8 being the uncertain area, and the lower results being negative and the higher results being positive. Some of the other games you can see either follow that same pattern, and Adventure Conquer King System First Edition, pretty much similar with slightly different breakouts, but it's still got the top of the bell curve, the 7 through 8 is being neutral, and same thing for Hyperborea Third Edition. Again, slightly different breakout, different wording, but the same basic idea. Some of the other games, like Basic Fantasy, does a little bit of adjustment where there is no neutral entry in this table, and the unfavorable kind of leans itself into that top of the bell curve, the 7. So it's more likely to get an unfavorable or worse condition than a favorable or better. Similarly, in Shadow Dark, the neutral is not at the top, the 7, but neutral is at 9, so all the way up to 8 a result, we get either suspicious or worse, hostile, and then the the very top is reserved for curious or friendly. And then, like I mentioned, the AD&D is on a percentile, so there is no bell curve per se, but we do have neutral in the center again, and the lower results are the unfavorable, and the higher results are the favorable. My personal experience with going back to the beginning of my first dungeon mastering attempts were with AD&D, so that's how I kind of started. And I can't remember exactly, but I think I kind of looked at this table and I did not really incorporate it into my game mastering, to be honest. It seemed a little bit wonky and just too random and chaotic, if you will. And I had, at the time, enough chaos and unpredictable behavior in the real world, and I didn't want to replicate that kind of insanity inside of my game. So for what it's worth, I didn't really carry forward or have an appreciation for using the counter reactions at the time. Although I think I did develop my own system of varying up the encounters so that I had a wide variety of things going on, but it wasn't through this mechanic of reaction tables. And one other thing that I'll mention is that all of these tables are kind of like varying the same aspect. You call it disposition or attitude, or a general inclination toward violence or bellicosity, or even if it's not combat related, a willingness to work with somebody or agree with them, or accept their proposals or reject them. Now I'd like to take a little bit of a closer look at Shadow Dark in particular, and if we go to the page before the reaction table, the prior page, we'll see something interesting here, called another table called Activity, and it says, what is it doing? When the characters encounter new creatures, roll to determine the creature's current activity. This might impact how likely they are to notice the characters. And I'd say it also could have, a good impact on the general behavior of how they're going to react to the characters at the same time. This is obvious in entries such as 12, sleeping, but also like 5 to 6, eating, or 11, guarding. Could establish that the creatures that you encounter may not be pleased that the PCs are there, but they also have other interests as well, and they don't necessarily, whatever they're eating, they don't want to necessarily abandon that unless it's being threatened by the PC. Similarly with whatever they're guarding, they're not necessarily going to abandon their post, but they're going to be very wary of what the PCs are doing. Maybe they will if they need to, but that's one of the things that could drive into that kind of uncertain scenario. And it's kind of important to know, not just that, somebody's neutral or uncertain, but why. And, that will drive a lot of the role play of how things are going to play out at the table. All right, here's a small sample from a fantastic supplement, the Monster Overhaul, a practical bestiary by Skirples. We can see our old faithful 2d6 reaction roll table But here, something interesting. We've got a number of different columns for, different types of encounters, different ways of interpreting those same results. From an encounter with a feral creature, one or more feral creatures, it's just the general interpretation of the table. Grandiose. This is kind of interesting, yeah, because, you're going to have different types of reactions, if your encounter is, during a masquerade, let's say, or some sort of social engagement, or at court, rather than, if you're out, fighting some creatures in the swamp or something, or in the dungeon. And finally, an unusual table, column, an interpretation of the reaction roll. We also have right below it, in some ways similar to the, activity table from Shadowdark, reasons for an encounter. And this is also broken into columns. So you can try to, take the most appropriate one. And right below that, more tables of what kind of situation this is. Table for impediments if you want to add some other, complications or interesting aspects to this encounter. Twists and the formation if you're encountering a group of creatures, what formation they're in. So this entire supplement is fantastic, and this is just a tiny, tiny excerpt from it. But it touched on our topic of reaction rolls, and I wanted to share it with you. Another product that I've mentioned in several of my past Musings videos is Social Encounters Along the Silk Road by the RPG Pundit and published by Mad Scribe Games. Although written with Pundit's Sword and Caravan setting in mind, it is usable in any system or setting to better adjudicate social roleplay. There are mechanics in here and templates for dealing with situations such as haggling, bribery, intimidation, rumor mongering, etc. So I highly recommend taking a look at this setting and using it to incorporate those kind of more social, intelligent, human to human, or whatever fantasy race kind of contact. It's all within the system of a 2d6 reaction roll. Here we have the encounter section of the game Tales of Argosa by Pickpocket Press. We can see a version here of our trusty 2d6 reaction table. Tales of Argosa also has, like Shadowdark, an activity section with a d6 table with 6 different types of activities, and then 2 different columns for some basic ways of interpreting those activities for intelligent creatures or other creatures, which is very helpful. What I really want to focus on here from Tales of Argosa, which I think is fantastic, is that in their stat blocks for all of the creatures in their monster section, they have a reaction table, custom reaction table. It's explained in the monster section as follows. Each monster has a list of custom reaction results to better reflect the inclinations of that kind of creature, should the GM wish to use them. Now, if we take a look at, some sample creatures, let's say like the owlbear, which is described here as owlbears are 10 feet of foul-tempered, bloodthirsty beast, quick to rage if challenged, inconvenienced, or looked at the wrong way. And then if we go all the way to the bottom of the stat block, we can see there it says reaction. 2 to 6 is enraged, 7 to 9 is violent, 10 to 11 is aggressive, and only when we get to 12 is it sated. So the best you can hope for with the owlbear basically is that it's already eaten and can't be bothered with you. providing you give it a wide enough berth and don't get too close to it. Now, there's still some interpretation needed for, like, what's really the difference between, enraged, violent, and aggressive. But it really gives you that feel. And I'd probably, adjudicate this in that, depending on what your distance, how close when you first noticed that you were, in the vicinity of an owlbear, and the owlbear, notices you. And use the distance and surprise rules for whatever game you're using. I'd personally say if you if it's enraged, it's coming for you, over pretty wide distance, and it's running full steam to get to your party and tear you apart. Violent, maybe if you come up right on it. Same deal. It's going to be aggressive and attack. But if there's a little bit of a distance, maybe it's just going to, rear up and scratch the trees like a bear might, showing you, okay, this is my territory and I'm king of the hill here, and you get the hell out of here. And then aggressive for, maybe you could even get away with being a little bit closer, but it's still going to, stare you down and tell you, you got 5 seconds to get the hell out of here, or otherwise there's going to be trouble. Now we move on to, like, skeletons. Skeletons are magically animated undead that unerringly follow the orders of their creator, even if their master has long since passed. They have no personalities as such and are more automaton than creature. And the reaction table at the very bottom just reiterates that. The reaction is there is no role. It just follows the creator's orders or is hostile. And finally, Spectre. Spectres are incorporeal undead that pass through solid objects like water. They possess a malign intelligence and recall much of their former life, tainted by all-consuming hate and torment. And if we look at the reaction table at the bottom, it's the 2 to 8 is murderous. So that's a pretty wide range. 9 or 10 is malevolent, and 11 or 12 is infatuated, which is that last entry is quite interesting. It kind of makes you think. And this kind of idea that came to mind is that, if their specter's infatuated, maybe it is like mistaking you for a person that it knew in the past, maybe, somebody that they loved in the past, and now it wants to be next to you or be with you, but not necessarily to kill you, which is in itself is a very terrifying prospect, to have a specter be infatuated with you. But it may be something that you could use to your benefit, that's not going to immediately attack you, in forming some sort of plan. Of course, if the specter finds out that you are not who it initially thought you were, it could become extra murderous, and you maybe go from the last on its list of people to kill to the very top. Let me also bring up an aspect of the Monstrous Menagerie, a part of Level Up Advanced 5th Edition by EN Publishing. Some of the creatures here have something called monster behavior. Roll on the monster behavior table determines whether a monster or group is hiding in ambush, looking for help, preoccupied with a prisoner, or any of thousands of other individual behaviors. Looking at some of the same samples that we used for Tales of Argosa, we can see things like a table for owlbear behavior, including things like advancing towards a wounded humanoid, perhaps a scout or warrior, or that the owlbear is tracking you, or up to it avoids you unless provoked. Interestingly, the behaviors of the skeleton and the specter are somewhat reversed, in that the skeleton actually has a number of different, two different tables, depending on whether we're talking about a humanoid skeleton or a beast skeleton, but has a number of different activities that the skeletons could be up to. Including, this one kind of amuses me, miming everyday activities such as drinking and dicing, attacks if approached. Whereas the specter here is pretty much all murder all the time. And just a few other words about, speaking about modern role-playing games. There is an excellent article on the Angry GM's blog, and I put here the title of that article and the date. Resolving social actions. It actually has the URL here that you can take a look at, and it's an excellent description of an approach that game masters can take when players approach an NPC and try to negotiate with them and try to convince them to take an action that the NPC might have initially some objections to. And it, even though this is being described for D&D 5th edition 2014, it's not at all any of the bad modern play styles that we might associate with that game system. And believe it or not, there were still some vestiges of reaction tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide, at least of 2014. I have no idea of the current version, nor is it on my list of things to examine in 2026. But I do believe this blog article is worth a read, regardless of the system that you're using. All right, and the last product that I'd like to spotlight with regard to reactions and counter reactions is not a game or a supplement, but rather dice. These are 2d6, our favorite reaction oracle, but these dice are the Nuul dice from Tower House Creative. They do have the 1 through 6 on each of the dice, and in addition, they also have different icons on each face of the die. And as we can see from the face meanings breakout here, each icon relates to some aspect of reactions. These dice can be used in a number of different ways, which the instructions that come with the dice explain. But they can be used individually to give like a general category of type of reaction. They can also be used in a set where one die, almost like what do you call it, like a D66 table. So you get basically 36 different combinations. I've selected here a sample of 3 of those 36 different possibilities to give you a feel for what we're talking about. If the first die is a heart, let's say, and the second one is the money bag, well, that might suggest a donation for a cause, or their friendship is for sale. If the first die is the mist, and the second is a heart, it isn't clear why, but this creature is friendly. This may be slightly unsettling, or maybe a false kindness, only noticeable around the eyes. Finally, if the first die is a money bag, and the second die is the speech bubble, a bribe will make the creature much more open to talk. For money, they will keep a secret. The creature may offer the party money for information. And these are just sample interpretations. Once you get a feel for what the 6 different faces represent, you can kind of, build up a skill for being able to make your own interpretations on the fly. And finally, we come to morale and morale checks. And I will say, for the most part, I pretty much agree with everything that Eric said in his video about morale and morale checks, with a few clarifications and some of my own opinions. First of all, I'll return to Eric's statement that reaction rolls and morale checks in BX, quote, they aren't optional. Well, if we take a look here at the actual rules from Moldvay Basic and Cook Marsh Expert, in both the table of contents and the headers of those rules for morale, we can see that they clearly are marked as optional. Now, having said that, I'm going to side with Eric on this one from a practical point of view, that morale checks are in fact built into the system, and I don't know why they noted them as optional. I thought at first, maybe they're marking morale as optional for like beginning dungeon masters to try to simplify things, but really, a beginning dungeon master could start with a dungeon that has maybe some monsters like skeletons that have a morale of 12, which means they are not affected by morale, as we can see here of the write-up. But then I thought, well, clerics can turn undead, and the turn undead feature is far more complicated than morale, so that can't be it. And then looking at the module that I believe came with basic Moldvay Basic, the Keep on the Borderlands B2, has a section in there that first of all, it uses morale throughout the module, just like it's every monster statted out in Moldvay Basic has a morale score. But also it's quite advanced. Well, I would say quite advanced, but it's a little complicated in the one of the samples in the Keep on the Borderlands, where you can see like there's one room with kobolds, and they're described as very large, beefy guards, if you will, and they have a morale of 6. So if there is a cause for a morale check, you roll 2d6 on a 7 or better, they'll fail. But the very next room is the Kobold Chieftain's room. And, he has a morale of 8, a little bit higher, because he's a huge kobold. And not huge in the, 3rd edition, 5th edition sense where he's as big as a hill giant. It just means he's, an extra beefy kobold. But in the same room, there are 5 female kobolds who have less hit points and less attack, but they also have a morale of 8 because of the chief. And that matches what the Moldvay Basic stat for kobold is. It has a line here that says, as long as the chieftain is alive, all kobolds with him have a morale of 8 rather than 6. So presumably, if the players take out the chieftain, the morale of the females will drop back down to 6. But this is a rather involved, it's kind of interesting, but it's a rather involved scenario to put in your basic module that for beginning dungeon masters, and then simultaneously say, yeah, but also this whole morale system is optional. So it doesn't quite hang together for me. and then it continues. The morale continues to be baked into the entire system through expert, which assumably you're a little bit more experienced by the time you get up to expert. As we can see, here with the Wyvern has a morale of 9. And as all of the monsters in the basic rules have morale scores built into their stat block, and even in the modules, like I'm showing here, X2, Castle Amber, one of the new monsters there, which happens to be a plant, so it also has a morale of 12. It's not fleeing anywhere. So the fact that it's specifically labeled as optional is quite puzzling in both basic and expert. All right, getting back to Tenkar's reaction and morale video. Eric tells us that when morale breaks, monsters flee, enemies surrender, hirelings hesitate or bolt. In BX, we're given instructions that if the morale check result is greater than the monster's morale score, the monsters will try to retreat or use a fighting withdrawal. So there's a couple of things I can see here. The first is that I actually like Eric's variety of responses to failed morale checks a little bit better than just the fighting withdrawal or retreat, such as the possibility of surrender. But the other thing is, I won't get too much into it, in this particular video, but even with the retreating and the fighting withdrawal, that in itself doesn't necessarily mean a quick end to the combat. If the players decide to pursue anyhow, continuing the combat, it can still get dragged out just as long, maybe even longer than if everybody had just stayed put and just continued to bonk each other over the head until death. And I think this is true whether it's the monsters failing their morale check and fleeing, or it's the player characters deciding that things are not going their way and that they need to back out of the fight and retreat. I looked around a bit, and to tell you the truth, I didn't really see a really good set of options for discontinuing a fight. There's a little bit in Tales of Argosa about party retreat rules, and I've heard a little bit from 13th Age. Game has some player retreat mechanics, and of all things, the Doctor Who RPG and similar mechanics in the Land of Eam, the new Land of Eam game. But it's something I need to look into a little bit more. But the fighting withdrawal is a good, for tactically, repositioning and perhaps retreating. But and I think Hyperborea 3rd Edition has similar rules for a fighting withdrawal or fighting defensively. I forget the exact terminology. One thing I can say that can be done is when designing the area that combats are likely to take place in, whether it's in a dungeon or an outdoor area or such, being able to design that area, that architecture, the terrain, or what have you, and establishing maybe some choke points, things that can be used tactically, may be beneficial to being able to design places where realistically, a fight could be broken off from. Even if it's a doorway that, the players can move through and then, attempt to shut it behind them and wizard lock it, to to establish a little bit of a break that they can then make their retreat from. With regard to retainers and hirelings, Eric tells us that morale matters most with retainers. And since player characters themselves are not subject to morale checks, I could see that having your retainers fail their morale checks and bolting or breaking apart, or even having your torchbearer run away with your light source could be certainly disastrous in the wrong situations. But I do want to review what BX says with regard to retainer morale. And I won't read the entire section, but it does say that retainers must check morale after each adventure. If the morale check is failed, they will not adventure with their employer again. Retainers do not need to check morale in combat unless the danger is greater than might reasonably be expected, which is, certainly a bit subjective, but kind of suggests that things are already a bit disastrous by the time, if you decide that the retainers need to check morale. And even in this case, I think that the, game masters should kind of, assess the situation. If the party is well into, a dungeon complex or on a dangerous journey or something, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for retainers to just start fleeing into the darkness, out of the frying pan and into the fire, so to speak. They could certainly become argumentative and belligerent and, demand that the player character party, start, immediately to make their retreat out of the dangerous situation, or whatever seems to make, the most sense to, as quickly as possible, get the retainers to, some sort of safe location. And then the retainers, break their bonds with the party, and say they never want to see them again. And I suppose if the morale check is, sufficiently, failed by a large amount, you could determine that the retainers do indeed panic and do something that, makes no logical sense, but out of just, raw fear, they just panic and just flee in some direction. But for the most part, it wouldn't make sense for them to just run away into what is, more than likely certain death. Although we might be able to borrow some ideas from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition morale failure table. So in AD&D 1E, the response to a failed morale check is actually based on how badly it did fail. We can see looking at it, and remember this is also based on a percentile, because that's the way that AD&D First Edition did such things. But if the failure is only by 1 to 15%, then we have kind of an orderly retreat, a fighting withdrawal in BX terms. If it's a little bit more, 16 to 30, then it's a disengage and a retreat. So you just immediately start running, which will probably invite a free attack against the retreating creature. If it's even more than that, 31 to 50%, then it's flee and panic. So basically, probably dropping anything they have and just moving as fast as they can away from the battle. And at 51% or greater, they surrender. And to be honest, I'd probably actually reverse those last two. Surrender is the more the more rational of the options. Considering you're in a situation where your surrender will more than likely be honored, and they won't just kill you or eat you anyhow. If surrender is on the table, I'd probably put it, more up towards the more rational morale failure, and the flee and panic is exactly that, just a panic, absolute terror. And that reminds me in a way of the what they call the 5 main trauma responses. You're probably familiar with the term fight or flight, but there are actually 3 more F's that go along with it. Fight, flight, freeze. So just you freezing in place in terror. Fawn, which is basically trying to appease or make nice with your the source of your terror, which surrender is probably a good equivalent of that. And the 5th F is flop or faint. Sometimes that's called. And this is basically where if it's fainting, your body just kind of gives out to the fear, and you just collapse into unconsciousness. And that brings me to the last thing that I'll say on this subject, and that is to point to another one of the Angry GM's articles from his blog site. You can see it here. The flesh golem is willing, but the spirit failed its morale saving throw. And there's this is another excellent article with some good information. It's also coming from a D&D 5th edition viewpoint, but also a more general. It's an application to 5th edition, but it's really a more general examination of morale checks, or what he calls morale saving throws. But I would like to, in particular, highlight one of the things that the Angry GM is talking about, and that is to have kind of predetermined, individualized responses to failed morale checks. And he's got a couple of keywords that he says he uses, such as panic, rout, retreat, surrender, rage, or betray. And many of these concepts we've basically already talked about. Where retreat is an organized retreat or a fighting withdrawal. Rout is you just a fleeing retreat. Panic, we said, total abandon. Surrender is pretty self-explanatory. But in addition, rage, the idea of basically when you fail the morale check, a creature may, instead of fleeing fighting, just go into a berserk rage. And this may, according to the game system they have, be what's sometimes called like an all-out attack, or things that might sacrifice defense, lowering of armor class or such, and turn for just attacking as hard and fast and furious as possible. And the last one, betray, is also an interesting concept, where, in the case of monsters that your player characters are fighting, the monsters may try to make a deal with the players and lead them somewhere, or into some secret chamber, or give them some items of worth. Even promise to fight with them. If your retainers break morale and decide to betray you, that could be interesting as well. And I would consider betraying similar to surrender as a type of fawning let's say, from a psychological viewpoint. What the Angry GM doesn't list here, which I think would be interesting, is the faint or flop response to a failed morale check. I would love to see the response of my players if a group of goblins all fail their morale check, and most of them make an orderly retreat or just flee away, but a few of them just collapse over, stiff-limbed and flopping over. I think it would be amusing. And so, until I resurface, may your successes be many and your failures be memorable.